Welcome to this edition of Cup Chat with Birding with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. Today's special guest and Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Specialist, Dr. Larry Stein, joins us to discuss growing native plants and helping a few of us out with our non-native plants, aka Emily's Orchid. Hope you enjoy. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Cup Chat with Birding with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. We are on gallery view. Maureen, can you fix that for me?
Oh, yes, I can. I sure can.
Thank goodness I watch us live as we do it. So can you see us all now, everybody?
We're good now.
Oh, yeah, you can see us all, everybody. So welcome. Happy Wednesday morning. I am happy to be back. Maureen did tell me that last week's Cup Chat was amazing, even though it did not stream live and we had some technical difficulties. So if you have any trouble with it, if you missed it, and haven't gone back and rewatched it, go rewatch it. Maureen, what was your favorite part of Cup Chat last week?
I didn't realize that. So I knew about sandhill crane migration in Nebraska, obviously, like that's where that Cup Chat came from, but I only thought about it from the morning perspective. And I didn't know that they have morning and evening tours and just how cool both of them sound. Because as we were just talking about before we went live, I'm a morning person. Emily's a night owl. And I had always thought like, oh, someday I'm going to go and see the cranes, and you wake up super early and you go see them. And then when we started talking about, Mr. Tadikin started talking about the night experience, the evening experience, and it's like totally different. And so I was like, now I have to go to both and spend a whole day. So that was my favorite part, was I just learned more about what that whole experience is like. So
anyways, go check it out. It's on our birder bucket list. And we really do need to create an actual birder bucket list and post that one day. That would be fun. So moving on to today's Cup Chat. Sorry, Dr. Stein. So is joining us special guest, Dr. Stein. He is, Dr. Stein, you'd have to tell me your official extension title, but all I know is he's the plant god in extension. And he knows all about plants. If you have a plant question, you go to Dr. Stein. If you need a plant program, Dr. Stein comes and does one. So what is your actual specialist title? Plant God with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension?
No, I'm an associate department head and also a professor in extension horticulturist. And I work on pecans, fruit crops, vegetables, Texas superstar plants, and just a little bit of everything. So anyway.
And we might have to do another Beyond Birds about pecans, because Dr. Stein's got his pecan boards there in the back. And there's just, I don't know, all the different varieties and the history, and it's super cool.
Yeah, they're native and good.
Everybody stay tuned.
Wildlife food. So yeah, that'd be good.
Native. Do birds eat them?
They do.
Yeah.
Are they one of your
open first?
There's some about that big. You know, the end of my little finger, they're about that big. And so the turkeys just love them. They just eat them whole. So
interesting. Okay, so today we're going to go the native plant route and talk about native plants. And you're going to kind of help me grow those, because I don't grow things very well, as we all know. But the other thing is, before we jump to native plants, I have to go ahead and get my plant question of the day out. And I brought my prop, and it is not a native plant. Let me turn my background off, everybody. Because when you get Dr. Stein on the phone, you go ahead and ask him these things. So this is my orchid. And I don't know if you can tell, Dr. Stein, I was trying to be very good, but I broke it right here as I was trying to pin it up. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Everyone?
You broke the bloom stem?
I broke the bloom stem. Is there any coming back from that? It's slightly attached.
It looks fine. It looks fine.
Okay, just leave it.
Yeah, just leave it. Don't mess with it. Don't mess with it. And you don't even have to tie it up like that. Just let them go, and it'll stand up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You were just trying to be too nicey there, so just let it go, and it'll stand up. And then that's pretty cool, though. You're growing a Phalaenopsis orchid.
Yes, and it died.
What?
It died. And then we brought it back to life, and I have a new root going down. And I can share everyone my orchid growing secrets is I've put it in the window of my kitchen, and I put 3 ice cubes on it. Try to do that twice a week, but when I'm out of town, I just put 3 ice cubes when I come home and 3 ice cubes when I leave. So that's my that's my orchid care tips for the day, everyone.
Well, that's pretty cool because it needs the light. The light's with the key, but they're really fabulous, and the bloom spike's going to be amazing, and the flowers are just out of this world. So yeah,
I'm
good for
excited.
you.
I think you started us off on a good point, Em, because here's the thing. Something Emily and I have a lot of things different. Something we have in common is that neither of us is good with plants. And the ice cube tip is actually something my husband came up with. The plants alive in our house, not me. But so that's where I kind of want to start, Dr. Stein, because one of the most eye-opening moments I had when talking to Dr. Cochran, who is our plant pathology specialist, who we'll have to have on someday to talk about plant diseases. She said, sometimes when you've got this, I had some kind of vine in my office and I had overwatered it. Like I would let it go too dry and then I'd be like, oh no, it needs lots of water. And I put too much water. And she said, too many people with plants go from this extreme of too much, not enough. And she said, just if you realize it's been a while, just put a normal amount of water on it and then let it go a little more and then put a normal amount, get back on that normal schedule. But I was not caring for it. And then I was over caring for it. And so Dr. Stein, can you start us off with just for somebody who knows nothing about gardening and we're going to grow some or whatever outside, where do we start? How do you know how much to water and when to water? And it's got sun and shade and all these different things.
So let's answer your question first. I mean, when you grow plants inside, it's really easy to mess them up, because it's a totally different situation than being outside. So indoor plants, that's special deal. So anyway, but outdoors, the key is that you don't overdo it. And all these plants that we're going to talk about, native plants, whatever, they all need well-drained soil. And that's where a lot of people mess up, is if the soil doesn't drain well, I mean, you may water it every 3 weeks, but if it drains well, you may water it every other day. And so that's the key, is you got to read your soil and make sure that you don't overdo it.
So my mom used to tell me and I'm sure this is a good scientific method here, is you stuck your finger in the pot, and if it was wet, you watered it. And if it was dry, if it was wet, you didn't water it. And if it was dry, you did. Is that a good method, Dr. Stein?
That is excellent. That is
okay.
Excellent.
The finger wet pot method. Okay.
That's right. We tell people dig down 3 inches, grab a handful of soil. If it balls together, ball, you got plenty of water. If it doesn't ball together, you need to water. But your mom's information was very good. Very good.
She can't keep plants alive either, so I was hoping you'd tell her she was wrong.
Well, she's got the watering down right. I mean, more plants are killed from too much water than not enough.
Interesting. See, and I'm very good reuser. So I have 2 plants in my entire house compound here thing. I have my orchid and I have a sedum succulent plant. And it sits on my front porch, except for when it's cold and it lives next to the window. And all I do is I dump my empty bottle. Like if I drank a bottle of water and I have half left, I just dump my water on it. And that's what he gets to drink. Okay. All right. So as we've talked about that, water is probably the key. Now, as we talk about native plants, are there any considerations when we start talking about growing native plants? How does that change what we think? Do we still do the finger test? How much of that is relevant as we start growing native plants?
In reality, it's all the same. And that's where people mess up with native plants. They all have the idea, well, it's native, we just leave it alone. But a native plant's just like any other plant. When you plant it, you got to take care of it for at least the first year. Got to get it established. Once it's established, then it can tolerate the extremes. But some native plants are not as thrifty, hardy as others. And so that has a big factor as well. Exactly what you plant, where you plant. A while ago, Maureen asked about sun, shade. The biggest challenge is shade. Shade. If you have shade, then it's easy to overwater, and shade plants don't grow as well. And so that complicates the situation as well.
So if you're a beginner, getting sun-loving plants in a sunny spot is a better start than trying to grow stuff in the shade.
Correct.
I needed that tip too. Okay.
But can you have too much sun? Because I felt like when I put my succulents in the sun, which I know succulents are not, I don't know if succulents are native plant in that area, but I felt like when I put my succulents in the sun and they got too much, they did worse. Like direct sunlight. Is there a difference between sunlight and like sitting in the sun?
Well, so the term we need to use is acclimate. You have to get those plants used to that. And so when you take a succulent that's been inside or in the store and you set it in direct sunlight, wow, it's going to fry it. Absolutely. So you got to acclimate, slowly adjust it to that. But no, most plants, especially if you're trying to grow a flower or a fruit or you want it to bloom, full sun is the key. And too much sun that's not a thing. So anyway, but they have to get adjusted to it. You just can't stick them out there and expect them to do really, really well.
Well, that's kind of what I expected.
Emily has high expectations for her plants and animals. That's like
I do. I had my chickens. So we had some chickens, Dr. Stein, from the Egg to Chick program. And of course, so then I told them I let them go in the pasture. And I told them that they were now pasture chickens and they had to live like the goats. And so to stay away from raccoons and pox and stay away from all the things that could eat them. But I was not going to take care of them. They were on their own at that point. I gave them a shed. I gave them a shed and they had to get in the shed when they needed that.
Well, as long as you train them to go in the shed at night, you should be fine.
Yeah, well, they were hardy chickens. They took their pep talk very well.
Oh, well, good.
My plants haven't done the same.
Yeah, you're good.
So it's the sunshine, not as like, is it the sunshine more so than the temperature? Because I have a Plumeria that my husband has kept alive for me for a very long time. And
what is a Plumeria?
It's beautiful. It's not native here. Oh. It's from Hawaii. And I brought it back as a cutting when I was a kid, and it's beautiful. But of course it can't tolerate freeze. So we bring it in and like right now it's inside the house, but then we'll take it back out during the day so it can have a little bit of sunshine. And so obviously like once it gets to where it's not going to be freezing at night, we just leave it out and it does fine. So it kind of then acclimates to that. But if you have something, say you're bringing home a succulent, is it better like to then get it outside when it's winter just because that sun's a little bit less direct, but it's more of like a sunlight thing and a temperature thing that they have to acclimate to?
Yeah, it's both, really. It's both. Yeah. I mean, certain succulents can't tolerate low temperatures.
Right.
And so you got to be careful that you don't injure it from the low temperature. So I would say succulents more of a summer type and acclimate them then. They're not really a winter type plant.
Okay.
Gotcha. Well, we are veering off the native plant train, guys, just FYI. So let's get back to the native plant train. Okay. And so Dr. Stein, you talked a little bit about the Texas Superstar plants. Why don't you tell everybody what those are? I mean, I know you worked really heavily on those with your extensions, through the extension service, and share with everyone kind of what those are. And I will look up the link to those and put that in the comments so everybody can find them.
Yeah,
Texas. And I should have said this before you started, but I have to go do a program. So thank you guys, and I'll see you later.
Bye.
So TexasSuperstar.com. Google that, and there's these hardy plants. And so we talk about native plants as being hardy plants. And so the program that we promote is Texas Superstar plants. And these are plants that tolerate a wide range of conditions all over the state. And so even though a lot of these are not native, their attributes and their livability are just as good, if not better, than native plants. So case in point would be something like Lantana, New Gold Lantana. You see that blooming everywhere during the summer, a very hardy plant once you get it established, and realize there are some native Lantana. And so you see the native Lantana that bloom out in the pasture, but they make the berries. And the scientific name on it, the species name is Horrida, Horrida, meaning they make a lot of seed and they just proliferate and they stop blooming. And so that's not good. And so the Lantana that we recommend is New Gold Lantana. And so it doesn't make seed. And so it blooms all summer long. And so that's what we like about it. And so there's a lot of others out there as well. So
I just put that link in the comments for everyone who's joining us this morning. And that's a great publication, especially if you are starting to plant or you're redoing your beds. Check that out. Dr. Stein worked really hard on that, and I think it's a great resource. are probably one of those best kept secrets of extension that we've created and put out there. So now, as we kind of talked about lantana, lantana is one of my favorite plants, and I think it is one of those things that I think is easy to grow pot or in the ground. But sometimes we talk about lantana being aggressive and kind of when we get that in the ground, it taking over and being bushy. And that's kind of one of those things people say about native plants is they can get aggressive and take over. How do we keep our plants in check? I know we've talked a little bit about that. I know there's this thing called pruning. I've never done that, Dr. Stein. I would never attempt to do it. I did pull off the dead leaf on my orchid once. So give us kind of, how do we keep those plants in check is what we're doing, pruning, and give us the 411 on that.
All right, right. So getting back to your thing about the aggressive nature of some of these plants, and indeed, some of those are like that. But the lantana thing, that harda, it's just a guerrilla type plant. Whereas these new improvements are not so much guerrilla plants. They're more compact and they bloom a lot more. And so to address your question of pruning, I mean, pruning, we're just cutting branches to keep a plant in bounds, and realize that when a plant is in an active state of growth and it's healthy and doing well, can't hurt them by pruning them. And so that's what I would encourage homeowners to do is if you got a plant and it's getting out of bounds, take some branches off. I had a major professor tell me once there was only one day a week that you couldn't prune a plant, Sunday. You know, obviously Sunday we're supposed to rest. So no pruning on Sunday, rest of the year, rest of the week, prune a plant. Just don't overdo it.
Really?
Yeah.
Anytime.
Anytime. So the big thing is if you prune it anytime, you don't want to be over aggressive.
Okay.
I mean, you don't want to just take the plant, say you got a 6-foot shrub, take it back down to a foot above the ground, you know, down to the ground. I mean, you do it sequentially, gradually, so that you don't shock it. You know, same thing we were talking about acclimating the plant to the sunshine. Same thing about pruning. So anyway. So I would tell you, if you got a healthy plant, got branches in the way, cut it. You know, you're not going to hurt it. If it's a healthy plant doing well, cut it. We tell you when you plant a plant, you know, a lot of people, they bring home these plants, they're in gallons or 3 gallons or whatever, and they're nice and full and pretty, and they put them in the ground and they don't cut any off. We think that you need to cut about 1/3 of the plant off when you put it in the ground. Because remember, that's stressful. You know, it's been doing well in this container. You set it out in your landscape, you know, and it's a totally different environment. You go from one extreme to the other. And so you need to remove a little bit of the top so that the stress is not so severe.
Wow. I never had thought about that one.
Yeah.
Well, and it's always funny to me how, you know, you get them home and they're doing great in their pots and at the Home Depot or wherever you buy your plants, and then you get them home and they automatically die. Yeah.
Well, so you got to remember, when you buy those container plants, they're growing in an artificial soil. It's not dirt.
Okay.
It's artificial mix. And they do that so that when they water the plant, the water runs right through. And that's so they can't overwater them, and that they do really, really well. So when you get it home, it's used to being watered every day. But then you put it in a clay soil.
You can't water it every day.
That holds a ton of water. Yeah, and then you overwater it and you kill it. So, yeah. So the best time to plant plants is right now. This is February. They're dormant for most part. So when you get them, you knock some of the media off of the roots. So that when you put the plant in the ground, the roots get in intimate contact with the soil they're going to live in. So real important there. And that gets back to that drainage deal. I mean, if you got well-drained soil, you'll probably be okay. If your soil doesn't drain very, very well, then that water thing is really critical.
Well, and it's a good point that we need to start planning and planting now, because most of us like to wait till it's pretty and sunshiny and it's a good Saturday afternoon. We run to Lowe's and Home Depot and we buy all the plants and we put them in the ground. And I get that because I've done that a lot of times because, well, as a county extension agent, sometimes I don't have, it's very rare that I don't have something on a Saturday. And so the Saturday I do have something and it's pretty outside, it just enacts me to go plant a plant and get a container and get it planted. And so get started now. I'm not going to be because it's stock show season, but all of y'all can and get out and get y'all's gardens planted. We'd love to see some pictures of those. All right. So true or false? Native plants are better because they don't need as much water.
That's pretty much a true statement.
True.
Much a true statement, but a lot of those Texas superstar plants, same category, even though they're not native.
Now, what about when we're first planting those native plants? We talked about they got watered every day at the store. When we first plant those, what's the best watering procedure? Because you're saying we need to acclimate them. They're used to being watered, but we're putting them in the ground. How do we do that?
Okay, so you plant them now when they're dormant, so they're not actively growing, and so they're not going to need a whole lot of water. So you plant them, water them in, refill the soil around the roots, water them again, and then forget about them for about 4 weeks.
That's nice.
If they don't have green leaves, if they're just dormant sticks, you don't want to water them because you want the roots to start to grow. And so plant them, like I said, take some of the media, water them, re-water them, and then in about 4 weeks, come back and use your mom's technique. Dig down.
Finger.
Dig down. Yeah, wet, don't water, dry, go ahead. And then once you get them established, they need 1 inch of water a week. 1 inch of water a week.
1 inch of water. And so this was really cool. And I know this is probably a little bit different than, I don't know what you tell people, but our turf grass specialist tells everybody to get a tuna can. And you water and you set it out in your yard and you see how long it takes to fill up the tuna can with 1 inch of water to water your yard. So I would assume you could do similar things to so as I stand there with my sprayer hose, I'm gonna put a tuna can down and I'm gonna time how long that takes, and that'll tell me how long it takes 1 inch of water to get there.
That is correct. That is a good system.
All right. Everybody needs a tuna can.
Yeah. So, if you have 5 plants, though, you can just water them with the hose.
Right.
Wet it down really good. And you could do that, probably once a week. But, still check it. If they're dry, water. If not, don't water. So.
Okay. Use the finger test, Mom. I will tell my mother. She's not on Facebook. I will tell her that she was quite famous today on Cup Chat.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
So a last question for the morning. We like native plants because they host a wide variety of insects for food, but they're also pests for our plants and can be a concern on damaging them. So how do we manage our pests on our plants? And I think, I guess from my perspective and my very small growing knowledge, I've never had a lot of pest problems on my yard plants or my flower plants. Any thoughts on that?
Usually that's right. I agree with your assessment that the pests on, shrubs and other things around your house, it's limited. And so I would just watch them, let's take pecan. Pecan's a native plant. And there's like 46 insects that will attack pecan. There's maybe 10 that could be detrimental, and really there's probably only 3 that affect the growth of it. So we're talking about webworms, the walnut caterpillar, and aphids maybe that would take the leaves off. The rest of the stuff just affects the nuts or this or that. So there's a tremendous amount of insects, usually just minuscule or damaging to the plant itself. And so I would just watch them, and if you see something feeding on the foliage, then you may need to react. If not, you're probably okay.
Gotcha. Okay, so, and now I don't know about this for everyone, but I'm going to plug out one resource that we have with Extension, actually probably two resources. And Dr. Stein, you can correct me if these are not good resources to share, but I think you'll be okay with it. So actually, everyone, if you have plant or tree or problems, Texas A&M AgriLife Extension offers two wonderful resources that I use even as a county agent. Dr. Stein probably knows all of them, so he probably doesn't use both of them, all the problems. But we have a plant pathology lab where you can send in, like, if your trees, something is wrong with your tree, you can take a cutting from your tree and you can send it in, and they will tell you if it's a fungus or something like that, Dr. Stein. But then we also have a soil testing lab. And so one of the great things about soil testing is they tell us to fertilize, add pre-emergence, blah, 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 blah. And doing some regular soil testing once a year, whether at your flower bed, your yard, out in your pasture, is a great way to know and understand your soil as you think about what you're going to plant, keeping things alive. And then those are great insights that if you have problems, you have a way to tell Dr. Stein or whatever extension specialist you're working with, hey, my tree's dying. I've done this soil test. This is what it said. I've sent off the cutting. This is what it says. Help me now. So Dr. Stein, elaborate maybe just really quickly. I know we're getting to that 8 o'clock mark, but how great those are as a resource for our homeowners and utilizing our soil testing and plant pathology lab. It's not a plant pathology lab. What is it called?
It's
plants. It's a plant lab. I'm putting the link in the comments.
Yeah. So the plant pathology lab, I mean, they test plant samples for potential disease, whatever, just like Emily was talking about. But what you got to realize is a lot of times you can determine if you're going to have a disease or not. It takes three things to have a disease, plant disease. Obviously, you have the plant. The other thing is the disease organism, but the third is the environment. And it takes warm and wet to have a disease. So if it's not wet, you're not going to have a disease, guys. And so you can, a lot of times figure out exactly what you got. But yes, utilize those labs. Soil testing lab gives you baseline data for what you have in your soil. A big challenge that we have out in West Texas, obviously, is high soil pH, where the pH is super high. And so you plant some of these plants and they turn yellow. And so if you know that going into that, then you can manage your plants so that you don't have that problem to deal with. So yeah, great resources. I would encourage you to use them both. Also check out your soil. If you're planting a bunch of plants, you need to know something about your soil. So there's a web soil survey. You can Google web soil survey and you can actually find your yard, backyard, your pasture, whatever, on web soil survey, and it'll tell you what kind of soil you have and how well it drains, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, I'm trying to find the link to that. Web soil survey. Google
NRCS.
Oh, I found it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm posting that in the comments as well, guys.
And
so
then
there are some great words.
Lastly, Aggie Horticulture. Don't forget about Aggie Horticulture. A lot of great plant information there.
Okay, link to Aggie Horticulture coming too.
Which is an addition to TexasSuperstar.com. So anyway.
Well, thank you, Dr. Stein. I feel so much better about my plants growing methods. And you telling me I'm not completely wrong. I think that, I guess the lesson I take from you today is a little bit of keep it simple. Because at the end of the day, we want to, sometimes we try too hard. And really, I'm just thinking about how we would be if we wanted, if we go outside without a jacket, or like me moving from Del Rio to Gillespie County. I have not acclimated to the weather, and we've all heard this like for weeks now, but I have now invested in a good jacket. And so think about your plants moving from Del Rio to Gillespie County. You've got to acclimate them as they go from Lowe's or Home Depot or wherever you're buying your plants, and how they were cared for there. And I mean, I think the biggest, thinking about planting your plants right now is probably a big change for a lot of people. But I think that would put everyone in a much better start and put everyone into success as they move into the spring. And so while all of your other neighbors, their yards and their plants are dying, yours would be thriving, and you can say, and win that yard of the month. So
yeah, there you go. So you made a good point a while ago about, planting on nice days. And that's usually what happens. Like this weekend's going to be nice. So people go to the nursery, they see all these plants, they bring them home, they stick them in the yard, and they expect them to live. So, yeah.
Now so let's talk about that. So if I go and buy a plant right now, it is February 9th. We all know that there is a potential of another freeze that could happen. What would I do if I planted today and I had another freeze coming? But if they're in dormant, it doesn't matter, right?
If they're dormant plants, no worries. And so if it's a spring growing plant, obviously I wouldn't plant it till after the danger of frost is past.
Okay, so when are we going to be done with all the freezes? I'd like to know.
Well, so it depends on where you're at.
In Gillespie County, that'd be where I want to know.
Yeah, if you're in Gillespie County, it's mid-March, late March, 1st of April. So here,
what plant do you look at to tell us if the freezes are over?
A lot of people use mesquite, but pecan is typically the latest to come out. When pecan starts to come out, usually no more freezes. So anyway.
There we go. All right. Do you have a favorite plant, Dr. Stein, before we wrap up for the day?
I'm impressed with your Phalaenopsis orchid. That was good. Good for you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm really bummed when I started to tie it up and I broke the top of that shoot right there. I'm really bummed. So I think I have one bud below the break.
Yeah, no, I think it'll heal over. I think it'll be fine. So
okay. I'm gonna just love it. I'm gonna not love it. I'm just gonna let it. I'm gonna continue with our regiment. So
all right. Well, very good.
Thank you everyone for joining us. If I knew what next week was, I could tell y'all. I have been out of town, so Maureen has been on duty. Oh, next week we are doing sparrow identification. That will be super fun, super specific, and we'll be talking about sparrow ID. So join us next week, 7:30. And details about our March 3rd crane webinar will be hopefully coming out soon, later this week or first thing next week. So we hope to have all those registrations up. Birding the Hills has been filled, so we're so glad for everyone who's registered, and look forward to meeting all of you guys. Thank you, Dr. Stein, for joining us, and happy planting everyone this week. And we hope to see you soon. Bye.
Take care. Bye.